Now, there are warnings for people to remain vigilant against scammers in the wake of the IT outage that caused chaos around the world.
Computer systems are still coming back online, but questions remain about the vulnerabilities exposed by the outage. Joanna Weaver is the founding director of the Tech Policy Design Centre at the Australian National University. She joins us now. Joanna, good to have you along. We'll get to the vulnerabilities that this has exposed in a moment, but while these systems are coming back online, the government is warning people to be vigilant and be careful of scammers, that they may attempt to scam people in the wake of this chaos. How would they be doing that?
Oh, look, we're hearing stories of people impersonating emails from CrowdStrike or offering support for people to get their systems back up. And I think the most important message for people here is if you're not a CrowdStrike customer, don't respond. And if you are a CrowdStrike customer, use your existing channels and certainly don't be sharing any personal information or bank details.
That's very good advice. How vulnerable, Joanna, are we here in Australia and as a world if a simple update failure like this can cause so much chaos across so many areas of life?
Look, without question, we've seen just how vulnerable the increasingly networked and interconnected world is. It's interesting because this incident really impacted Australia. We felt the brunt of it because this software update was pushed out overnight in the US when there was less computers online in the US, and so the impact was felt in Australia because it was the late afternoon in Australia. Interestingly, we've seen previous incidents where the opposite happened. So people might remember the WannaCry ransomware incident, which was back in 2017, which actually rolled out in Europe, and by the time it kind of rolled around the world, it was overnight in Australia, and the patches were largely available here in Australia by the time Australians were waking up. So, you know, sometimes geography works in our favour and sometimes it doesn't, and this is certainly one example of when it didn't.
When you're talking about updates, I feel as though I'm constantly being asked to update my computer or my phone and I'm pressing snooze, snooze, snooze. Will this incident, and should this incident, make us think about the way we update in its current form?
Look, it shouldn't impact the way that individuals update. So it's really important. The reason that those updates come to your phone or to your computer is usually because someone has identified a security vulnerability or there is an error with the software that needs to be corrected. And indeed, that's what happened in this incident as well. So it shouldn't impact individuals. You should be updating your software or your phones, your operating devices, as soon as those updates become available. What I think it will change, what I expect there will be a lot of reflection on, is how those updates are pushed out to people. So what we've seen with this incident, and we're still, you know, a lot of the focus at the moment has been on remediation, getting the computers and devices back up. The full deconstruction of exactly what happened is only just beginning, but it seems like CrowdStrike has pushed out an update that has in some way conflicted also with the Microsoft operating system. So there's questions here to be asked about, was that a mistake by CrowdStrike, a one-off human error, or is there a more systemic process issue that needs to be addressed in the way these updates are pushed out? And not just in the way that they're prepared and pushed up, but potentially also the way that they're coordinated with other providers across the sector.
We now know that there were about an estimated 8.5 million computers disabled by this outage. What do you make of the immediate response after the outage in terms of getting that crucial information out there? Because we're so reliant on the computer systems and the technology to communicate, but that was down.
Yeah, look, on the one hand, I think this is a good news story. When I think back, I was in government back in 2017-18 when we had WannaCry and NotPetya. I think when you look at the Australian government response, it was very coordinated. They stood up the national coordination mechanism. They had the large entities that were affected by this incident in the room with the CEO of CrowdStrike, providing updates. A fix was identified pretty quickly. I think there has been some people who are criticising that it took 6 hours, but 6 hours to have a fix pushed out and then instructions to people actually is pretty quick. So I think, you know, in terms of the specific incident response, this went quite well. I do think we need to have a broader question, and I hope that it prompts a conversation in Australia around, well, how do we communicate if that digital environment was degraded for a longer period of time? So how would the government be communicating with the public who, you know, if it had continued for a longer period of time, maybe would start to be, you know, becoming a little bit more aggravated about the situation. We saw media organisations were impacted. The ABC was impacted. Sky News was offline for a period of time. Also, as you mentioned, the devices themselves, so whether it's by communicating by email or by phones increasingly rely on digital networks themselves. So I think there is a conversation to be had about how Australians communicate in a crisis in a digitally degraded environment. And this is not just in relation to things like updates. We also saw this, for example, during the bushfires, that communications environments was degraded. So, you know, I think it leads to a broader conversation around resilience and redundancies. And I hope that this does prompt that conversation, whilst also acknowledging that we have come quite a long way in a short period of time.